Unlock the secrets of the supernatural with Paranormal M if you're fascinated by ghostly encounters, mysterious phenomena, and things that go bump in the night. Subscribing and turning on notifications is a must. Join us on this eerie journey. A case of mimicry? Along with other weird things that have gone on here, there's something in my house that seems to enjoy impersonating people. I've seen people use the term mimic to describe this sort of behavior, so I guess I will just call it that, unless there's something more appropriate that's warranted. The first time something like this happened was 3 or 4 years ago, during the spring or fall of the year. I had just come out of my bedroom on the second floor and walked to the top of the staircase when I saw what appeared to be my brother hurrying around the corner below me. I didn't see his face, but from his clothing, the back of his head, neck, stuff like that, I knew at once that it was him. I can't recall what I wanted from him, but I do recall that I wanted to talk to him about something or other. I thought, oh good, he's still here, and descended the stairs to speak with him, only to find the front door shut and the entire room deserted. My dad was in the kitchen washing dishes, and when I asked him if my brother had just been here, he informed me that he had gone outside with our dogs a couple of minutes before. Nearly the exact same thing happened a few months later, with the only real difference being that this time, the spirit or mimic was wearing different clothing. In that case, I thought I saw my brother in that day's clothing go past the wall, and then check to find nobody around. Yesterday was a different story. I had gone down into our finished basement on some errand when I saw what I thought to be my brother's shirt disappear around the corner to my left. I very clearly saw the material, which was a light blue color that closely resembled the tank top that he was wearing that day. And there was no mistaking that there was really something there. The only difference was that there seemed to be more of it than in the flimsy shirt my brother was actually wearing. Although I only thought of that bit later. I was 100% convinced that I had just seen my brother down there and turned the corner expecting to see him fiddling around with something. To my great surprise, there was not only nobody down there, but a few seconds later my brother came out of our laundry room or storage room to the right of the basement stairs. He said that he had been in there and had heard me descending the stairs and had decided to hide with the lights off to scare me when I came in. His plan might have been foiled, but it was a sort of a memorable trip to the basement all the same. UAP/UFO experience in Quebec, Canada, 2006. In May 2006, I was a resident of Quebec in Canada. I had turned 17 the month prior, and 1 year of high school remained before I graduated. My parents split up in 1996. Growing up, I found it challenging to be apart from my father. My brother and I could only visit him once or twice a year due to our physical separation. My dad was given the chance to relocate to Ottawa sometime in the early 2000s. As a member of the Canadian Armed Forces, my father had little control over his career, so when this opportunity arose, he seized it without hesitation. Finally, my parents would live in the same city. My father had been seeing another woman at the time. On June 3rd, 2006, they were married after she followed him. Sorry, I can't pronounce this word because it's French and I'm American, but it's spelled Gatineau. Gatineau? Perhaps. He's a wonderful father. My brother and I have always received a lot of his love and attention. Swimming in the summer and sledding in the winter kept us constantly occupied. We both had a passion for exploration and frequently engaged in outdoor activities. Going back to May of 2006, my father told us that he was getting married the following month. They wanted a simple marriage, nothing extravagant. They chose to host the wedding in their home and invite friends and family to join them in celebrating. I was asked by my father if I could find 2 female friends to work as servers at the wedding. Along with that, he said he would pay them for their time. I didn't have a lot of female friends at that time, but I immediately thought of Liz and Lindsay, 2 girls who were also close friends with one another. When I asked them to help with this event, they graciously agreed. I prepared for the end-of-the-year exams as well as the special event as June drew near. June 3rd, 2006. Finally, the wedding day has arrived. I've never been one for wearing formal attire. The fabric of the clothing always made me feel hot, uneasy, and irritable. But today was about my father and his wife, not me. Though comfort's not always a given in life, at least I looked good. My brother and I got to my father's house early. We were the first ones there. Liz and Lindsay soon followed. They were dressed elegantly and had a stunning appearance from head to toe. I was pleased that they agreed to lend a hand at my father's wedding. People thought they did a fantastic job and were very happy. I was thrilled to have them present for such an important occasion. I remember feeling out of place because I was so young. I couldn't have any alcoholic beverages for another 11 months, and the majority of people were in their 50s or older. My parents were very strict in this regard. Before my father drank any alcohol, he drove me back to my mom's house around 7:30 or 8 p.m. because I had school the following day. The commute was only 5 to 7 minute drive from each home because both parents lived in Gatineau and were relatively close to one another. A few hours earlier, my brother had left to return home. I said my farewells for the evening and laced up my shoes. I got in the car with my dad and we started the short drive back to my mom's house. Our route took us through residential streets before merging onto Highway 148. I want to mention a few things that increase the confidence and authenticity of this sighting before I get into the juicy details of my experience. My father had been a member of the Canadian Army for 26 years at the time of this incident. He was a vehicle technician who worked on bases for the Army and the Air Force. From a tank to an engine the size of a lawnmower, he could fix it all. His involvement in peacekeeping operations abroad included the Croat-Bosniak War. Many people consider my father to be a very professional, trustworthy, honest, and situationally aware man. He's rational, analytical, and logical as well. He has a keen eye and a variety of skill sets under his belt. His mind is filled with a wealth of fascinating information. Being an artist himself, he can express his art through almost any medium. My father is a quiet and modest man who has a great deal of sincere love in his heart, not just for people, but also for nature and animals. My father and I kept going, and we were now on Highway 148. I saw my father cast a couple of quick, incredibly curious glances out of his window. After a brief moment, he shouted, "Wow, look!" and pointed to the horizon in the north. He stopped the car right away and jumped out onto the roadside shoulder. I followed suit. In utter awe and fascination, we stood next to one another. I would never felt anything like it. It was a jumble of an intense fear, paralysis, excitement, joy, and confusion. This shouldn't be happening. But despite what my mind was telling me, it was. There was still plenty of light outside, and the sky was clear, but 2 reddish-orange orbs were whirling and dancing across the sky. Although very bright, these orbs were not blinding. They moved indistinguishably according to no discernible pattern. There were no distinguishing features that made one orb stand out from the other. Imagine having a laser pointer, similar to the ones professors occasionally use at universities. This will help you visualize the incredible speed at which these objects were moving. You stand at one end of the gym to activate the laser pointer. The laser point is visible at the opposite end of the wall, but it can move instantly from one point to another with just a flick of your wrist. To be clear, I was not seeing laser pointers in the sky. Rather, these UAPs could move and stop in a pattern similar to how a laser pointer could be moved around a room. These orbs would move erratically in both short and long directions, swiftly changing from one part of the sky to another. No signs of acceleration or exhaust could be seen. In the middle of their dexterous lightning-fast maneuvers, these orbs could also stop instantly. I do not remember how long my father and I stared at these orbs. Even though it might have only lasted a minute or so, it seemed to last much longer. Both orbs instantly vanished into thin air as quickly as a finger snap, ending the show with highly unpredictable and impossible maneuvers at light speed. I can recall at least 2 other cars pulling off the road to watch this happen, but none of us interacted with one another. We waited a short while after the orbs vanished before re-entering the car and making the brief drive home to my mother's house. This experience will be forever etched in my memory. It was an extraordinary encounter, which we still cannot explain to this day. For what we saw, we still don't have an explanation. One thing is certain, I'm confident in what I saw, and I saw it very clearly. I never reported this incident, primarily because I wasn't aware that there was a way of doing so for a very long time. I recently looked online to see if there had been any other similar sightings in the same time period, but I was unable to locate anything. The neighborhood newspaper didn't mention it either, as far as I can remember. Although it was my father's second experience, I had never encountered anything like it before. His first was in the late 1980s in Bellevue, Ontario. He informed the local police of the sighting, but they didn't believe him. At the time, he was still serving in the military and was employed at a CFB Trenton, a base for the Canadian Air Force. I've also been subject to several strange experiences in my life, which I still recall with excellent detail. The majority of these experiences occurred between the ages of 3 and 17. There was a period of my life when I saw a lot of this unexplained activity spiked as well. I will continue to write about these events in separate posts. I feel a lot more comfortable sharing my experiences now, as I feel the stigma attached to the topic is slowly being dissolved. Shadow people. They live among us. Personal experience. This was only my first occurrence with shadow people growing up. I had many more, mostly in my pre-teens or teens. Most of my paranormal experiences occurred within a range of 15 or so years, give or take. My earliest experience began when I was just 3 years old or so, and my last profound experience tapered off around 19 years old. The story begins with my first paranormal experience of shadow people. My parents met in the late 80s, and they were both serving members of the military. Shortly after they met, both my parents were assigned to an Air Force base in Ontario. I was born in there, and my brother followed shortly afterwards. Roughly a year after my brother was born, we were transferred to the province of Quebec. We were located in a highly francophone region in Quebec, where my father had been posted at an army base. My parents decided to buy a house in a neighboring town. It wasn't a luxury home, but I enjoyed my time there as a kid. We had a large backyard which I spent a lot of time in. The history of the house is unknown to my family. From the looks of it, the house didn't really appear haunted. It wasn't bent out of shape, it was just a 1970s, 80s cookie-cutter house in an ordinary middle-class neighborhood. I suppose this might be one of many versions of what a basic family home would look like in North America. In this house, at 3 years old, everything started. We were what I thought was an average family, but happy and in good health. Nobody had any serious issues. The family dynamic was awesome, and my dad was incredibly creative and fun. For the most part, we were good children. We did well in our early school years, and we weren't too spoiled, especially because we couldn't afford to be. But my mom did everything she could to pamper me and my brother. She wanted a good life for us. She would save her money to ensure that we always had new clothes and shoes for school. She also always taught us good manners to treat all people with respect and not to judge others. Despite their eventual separation, they remained to be amazing parents. They always did their best to offer us a good life. When we moved to this town, my mother sacrificed her service to follow my father's. I believe it was a fluke that they were previously posted to the same base, because in the 1980s, career managers were not as accommodating to service couples as they are now in Canada. She decided to use this opportunity to raise her children and look after the home until we were old enough to look after ourselves. Once you entered the front door of the house, there was a small square area for removing your boots and hanging your keys. There were 2 sets of stairs directly in front of you, one to the ground floor and one to the basement. Below and directly to the left, there was a bathroom, and inside the bathroom on the left side, there was a small storage space. The space was large enough to kneel down and walk into, so my dad used the space to develop the film, since it was a dark and secluded room. While the restroom was on the left, my room was on the right, which was beside my parents' room. I had a small window in my bedroom on the left side that had a partial view of our large fenced-in backyard. I couldn't see anything, though, since the window was located high enough on the wall, and I was almost at the basement level. Plus, I was just a little guy. I vividly recall many details. My parents purchased my first bed for me when we moved into that house. It was lifted up onto a metal frame and painted bright red like a maraschino cherry. There was also a railing that my parents later took off when I became older. It was between the ages of 3 and 4 years old, but well before kindergarten before I experienced something so impactful that it would forever be burned into my head until this day. Most nights we probably went to bed between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. We were familiar with the routine, and we followed it. We had a very military style of discipline in our home. Not only were my parents in the military, but so were the previous generations in my family, and that culture carried on. We weren't perfect kids, but I'd like to think that we were well behaved. One night, which looked pretty much identical to all other nights as a child, except for Christmas, I awoke in my cherry red bed. I knew it was late because it was dark outside from my window, but not so late that my parents were asleep, because I could still hear them talking upstairs with the TV on. I struggled to fall asleep, so I lay down on my bed, looking around the room like any curious child. I was getting uncomfortable, so I turned over to my left side, which would have been facing the door to my bedroom. It was dark enough in the room, but I was in my room long enough for my eyes to be well adapted to the darkness at this stage. The only light that I had was from this gentle backside of a faint porch light, and any ambient light from the moon, if any. I looked around the room, and then I began to draw my attention to my bedroom door. it had passively piqued my interest because I noticed that the area located directly in front of my closed bedroom door was unusually dark. I remember being able to look at the surrounding walls, but not that specific area for some reason. I kept watching the black mass, and I looked away a few times. Still looking around the room, I looked back at the door, and in the confusion saw an opaque black figure in the outline of a person, standing right there. It was probably about 8 feet away or so, give or take. I wasn't initially scared, and instead, I think I kinda giggled, thinking it looked like a person. And that some object in my room was obviously creating a very telling shadow of a humanoid. I kept looking into the shadows, but I started to realize that something seemed strange. The shadow itself was not on the wall. It was off the wall, in the room, standing like a person and opaquely black in color. No light seemed to come through. It was not transparent. It was not translucent. It was a deep black hole. Black. I was still confused, and I didn't really put too much thought into it, so I kept just gazing. In one moment, I was relaxed and intrigued as to what was causing this image in front of me, but in the next, I was struck with paralyzing fear as I started to see the figure move towards me. It wasn't walking like a human, or something I even recognized on the planet at that moment in my life. There were almost no features. There was no face, but I could clearly discern the shape of the body, arms, legs, and so forth. He resembled a man. When the shadow approached me, I didn't do so by walking. There were no fluid, human-like limbs moving around in a human-like or even Earth-like fashion. This shadow would vanish, then reappear a step or two closer in a moment, as fast as a shutter can trigger on a camera. I didn't stop looking. I couldn't shout. I trembled. I cried. And I had my blanket set against my eyes, but I kept watching as if it were a film. It continued to move itself towards me, disappearing, reappearing, disappearing, reappearing, until he stood right over me by my nightstand. I was petrified by that moment. With the speed, I threw the blanket over my head, and I buried my face as deeply into the pillows and blankets as I could without suffocating. It never left. My eyes were closed, but it made no difference. 3 of these shadows were penetrating their way into my mind, even though my eyes were sealed shut. These shadows were continuously morphing into vivid and horrifying shapes and unpicturesque images, all with the purpose to cause overwhelming fear. I could see them in my head. They were clear as day. It was almost like they were telling me, "You can't hide from us." I felt them take great pleasure in my fear. It was very dark and sinister, and I couldn't get these figures to leave. I felt trapped like a deer being surrounded by wolves. I could no longer bear it, as I knew I had no place to hide. Somehow, I had the courage to dash out of my room and scream for my parents. I remember running up the stairs to the living room, tripping, and on the way I shouted, "Mommy, Daddy, I have a man in my bedroom." I was emotionally distraught, weeping, trembling, and hyperventilating. My mother did what I think most moms would do and tried to reassure their kid that it was just a dream and to go back to sleep. I insisted on the fact that there was a man in my room. My parents took me back to bed, turned on the light, and said a prayer while leaving a holy crucifix underneath my pillow. It's the only case I can really recall in this specific town, but it wasn't my last experience. They came back at times later in my life, from the age of 9 to 18, and at much higher intensity. Our childhood bush house. When we were young, my cousins and I had a bush house at the end of the back garden just before the garden opened up onto the heath. Due to me being a full-time wheelchair user from birth, it was Gran's idea, that instead of having a tree house that had to be climbed, it would be safer and more practical to have a bush house that all of us kids could use. Even though we protested greatly, although I'm disabled, I frequently used to climb trees in the local parks and over the heath, with the help of my cousins, obviously. But Gran's word was final, and we never argued with her, as she was a beautiful and lovely matriarch, but also as tough as old boots and very scary when pushed. So with that, we busied ourselves on choosing an appropriate bush for our new play area. On selecting a perfect one, Gran delegated tasks to the older boys to clear an outer area of the bush and also make a little hollow inside of it with pieces of spare wood on the ground to serve as a basic floor so that my little wheelchair could run safely and easily get inside of it. Gran was reasonably young at the time, and while the boys were doing the heavy work, she arranged us younger ones in getting furniture, supplies, and accessories to make our new play space cozy and comfortable for us all. A year later, our bush house was in full use. In the daytime, us younger ones played in it after school. On weekends and holidays, and in the evenings and nights, it was a place where the older cousins could have some privacy away from the eyes of Gran and Mom to do whatever they wanted to do. Our bush house was cozy, though. We got chairs, beanbags, and floor cushions donated by relatives and friends of the family. We also had a small table that we made a tablecloth for. And our Auntie Jay made some pretty curtains that we hung up best we could. We even had a cupboard where we kept snacks in. And only when the older boys or Mom were there. We were allowed to use the camping stove to heat tinned beans and sausages or pot noodles up and make tea. Gran's bingo friend, Jean, donated a hand-me-down rug. It was shabby and out of date, but we thought it was beautiful. It was slap bang in the middle of summer holiday, probably in early July when this happened. Elle and I were 7 and G was 11. Our older cousin, G's brother, A, was there earlier, but by 3 o'clock had grown tired of hanging around with us and had gone out with his mates. The 3 of them were coming back later to make us all dinner on the stove. Elle and I were sitting on the table playing Beggar Your Neighbor, a pack of playing cards that we got from the living room cupboard, and G was sitting in the corner of the bush house on a beanbag reading. The secret garden for the 3rd time. It was another normal day at home. Nothing unusual or odd occurred, till around 4, when we all heard a sound that was at odds with the peaceful scene. It was between a growl, an owl's hoot, and a man's mumbling. We weren't particularly outdoorsy kids, being born and raised in the outskirts of urban London. But being bright little girls, we all knew that owls are nocturnal creatures, and the accompanying sounds that were mixed with the hoots didn't come from the same bird. The weird sounds were joined by a furtive and stealthy rustling coming from the back of the bush house. Actually, it was really near to where G was sitting. She jumped up, stifling a scream by covering her mouth with her hands. We also saw a dark dog-like size shape through the dense foliage of the back of the bush house, which incidentally led straight into the beginning of the heath, as I said earlier. The strange thing about this figure was that it was very present, but rather ethereal, almost as if the quote-unquote figure was attempting to hide intentionally. Also, throughout this period, there were no other natural sounds, no bird songs, no insect sounds, no background human noise. Being right in the center of a council estate, you could always hear people talking, cars revving and dogs barking, all the regular noises of urban community living. But at that time, it was as if the entire world had paused, and us 3 were the only ones conscious and present, along with the mysterious figure. We didn't know what to do, but we gathered together and both G and L took one hand of my wheelchair and pulled me back out of the bush house. not taking our eyes off this translucent figure as we went. When we were free from the bush house and close enough for home for us to feel out of danger and safe, we just looked at each other very doubtfully. We were crapping ourselves. G said suddenly, "Stay here, don't move or speak." She ran to the garden shed and climbed up the side to a sort of rotting roof. I completely lost it, letting out a squeal of utter fear. Quick-witted as usual, Elle put her hand over my mouth and hushed me. Elle and I watched while G looked over the hedgerow which divided our back garden from the beginning of the heath. From our position, her face was clearly visible. G's expression was a mixture of confusion, surprise, and fright, and her pretty brown eyes looked troubled. We waited for G to come back to us before asking her in an earnest way what she saw. She didn't answer straight away, but when she did, she said, "It was so strange. I didn't see anything. No dogs, no other animals." She paused, her young mind trying to summon the words to explain what she witnessed. "There was a man. I saw the back of him walking away towards the iron fence." My 7-year-old's mind found it hard to comprehend what G was saying, and one look at Elle told me that she was experiencing the same. We both said together, "What man, G? What did he look like?" G sighed, biting her lip, a habit that she still has today, when she's anxious, worried, or trying to explain something tricky or difficult. "I didn't see him properly. His face and all that. I only saw his back. He did have really long, scruffy hair, though." Her eyes wandered over nervously to the end of the garden leading out to the very public heath. Elle and I both followed G's gaze. We all shuddered. Nobody spoke for ages. For a long time we sat in silence, G and Elle sitting on the back step, and me in my wheelchair alongside them. Suddenly I noticed something and exclaimed to the others, "Everything's back to normal, listen." We all listened. The regular everyday noises had returned. The world appeared to have resumed business as usual. A while later, A and his 2 roommates, they came back sensing some tension from us. They asked us what was up. We did tell them everything, and 2 of them ran out to the back to have a look around. They were gone for about 45 minutes. When they returned, they said they didn't see anything. No strange man, no animals, nothing unusual or dodgy at all. We spent the rest of the day hanging out with the boys, eating dinner in the bush house, and later watching films and eating junk food. We didn't tell Mom about the experience until a few years back, long after we were grown up. We still didn't know or can't really explain what happened that day. Waking Dream Encounter. I come from a family of healers and sensitives, so I've had paranormal and supernatural experiences all my life, and a healthy respect for the spiritual world, which my Irish granny taught all of us kids. Around us constantly wherever we go. I've never really had any experiences with a black eyes child or children before. I don't even know if it really was that. But it's the nearest thing that I think it might be. It was about 7:30 a.m. I'd gone back to bed to catch up on some sleep after getting up with my husband and seeing him off to work. I was just drifting off to sleep again with my eyes lightly closed when the voice of my deceased grandmother said clear as a bell, "Be careful, pet." I've heard Gran many times before, so the only thing that made me uneasy was that, what did I have to be careful of? Mentally still very aware of Gran's warning, but reassured that my guardian angel was around me, I settled back down again. Again, my eyes were lightly closed when I heard a light tap on the bedroom window. We live in a council bungalow. Our small paved back garden is blocked off from the neighbors on either side, and our bedroom is directly inside it to save room. Telepathically, I could see through the window and the curtains a small, still figure standing pressed up against the window. Gran's warning resonated with me, and without saying the words out loud, I said in my mind as forcefully as possible, "You are not welcome here. Go away, stay away." I really don't remember much more after that until I woke up around 9:30 a.m. Later that day, I did smudge the home again. I had already smudged the bungalow that month. My cousins and I had always smudged our homes every month as Gran did, as it banishes negative energy as well as unwanted spirits. I've always thought of this as sort of a kind of waking dream, but there is little doubt in my mind, and I'm thankful as ever for my Gran for her warning. I'll be watching you. I grew up in a very paranormal active home in East Bethel, Minnesota in the mid-90s. As I mentioned in my previous posts, this house had every type of ghost you could think of. A shadow man in a hat and trench coat. Another shadow figure that bizarrely danced down the hallway. An unknown man in a fishing getup. A doppelganger of my father, giggling girls, and many other unseen entities. We experienced all kinds of unexplained electrical malfunctions, like the dishwasher starting itself despite not being used in years, radios playing and changing functions, seemingly on their own, and broken lights suddenly turning on by themselves for no apparent reason. There were also times that there would be knocking on the walls and explosive pounding on the front door, all without any plausible cause. This particular incident occurred in the summer of 1997. I was 5 years old and was just about to turn 6. My younger sister and I were sleeping in what was supposed to be our big girl's room. It was a previously unused room in the basement that my mom had decorated for us in sort of a ballerina Barbie theme, and she was expecting her baby brother. She wanted the new baby's room to be close to hers, so we were evicted from our cozy bedroom upstairs to the cold and neglected basement. My mom had added some Barbie sticker decals to the walls and splurged on a queen-size bed Barbie comforter and pillow shams to make the uncomfortable room seem more exciting to a 4- and 5-year-old. For some reason, me and my sister were sharing a bed in this new room, even though we had our own beds when we were in the upstairs room. Despite all of my mom's efforts and the assurance of my sister's physical proximity, the downstairs room always made me anxious. I would beg my little sister to let me keep the small television on to comfort, but she hated that staticky feeling that was emitted from the television that she seemed ultra-sensitive to. One early morning between 3:30 and 3:45 a.m., I woke up to an eruption of chaos happening around me. The first thing I became aware of was that my little 5-year-old body was bouncing up and down off the mattress without my control. I was laying on my back with my arms slightly to my sides. My knees were bent, sticking up in the air with my feet flat on the mattress. My body was bouncing as if someone was quickly jumping up and down repeatedly on the mattress very close towards my feet. The next thing I noticed was how dark the room was. It was always dark when the TV and all the lights were off, but this was different. It was so dark I couldn't make out the outline of the door opening less than 10 feet away from us. Meanwhile, the FM radio clock plugged in on the shelf above our heads was playing an unknown song at a volume that felt like it was going to shatter our eardrums. This unknown melody pierced the dark room like an alarm, causing panic and confusion. My sister was in the bed laying on her side facing me. She was not bouncing up and down like I was. She was shaking my arm and crying. She was begging and pleading for me to wake up and make everything stop. Without even taking a moment to think about how or why any of this was happening, I sprang up to my feet, and while standing on the bed, I pulled the power cord of the radio from the wall. Silence immediately enveloped the dark room and seemed to bring in calm. At the time, I didn't know the song that the clock radio had been screaming out, but as I grew up, I would learn that it was the Police's 1980s hit, Every Breath You Take. It took me 15 years after this experience to appreciate how creepy that song was, especially in the context of this event in a home plagued by invisible entities. Every breath you take, and every move you make, every bond you break, every step you take, I'll be watching you. After I unplugged the radio, somehow my little sister was able to go right back to sleep without so much as a peep about what we had just experienced. I don't remember doing so, but I know that I went to my parents' bedroom that night and laid down on the floor of my mom's side of the bed. I remember just laying there, wondering what it is that I had just experienced. What did my dog see and sense that I didn't? I, a 22-year-old female, have a black Bichon, I don't know if that's Bichon or Bichon, Bichon, currently vibing in my feet. He's 4 years old and male. He's the love of my life and the goodest boy possible to exist. He never barks or chases cats, or dogs, really. He's always quiet and understands when my anxiety hits me, cuddles with me until I sleep. Even when I shave him, which he completely hates and whines about, he gives me his paws and moves around for me to be able to reach him better with the shaving machine. When it's time for a bath, I just go to bath time and he zooms to the bathtub. He's really the greatest, and I fear for the time that he won't be around. A few nights ago, I got home a little bit late due to some work, and we went for sort of a night walk at 2 a.m. I don't mind the time because we live in a small village, and I usually take him around the corner and back. So for context, I live in a narrow street. My house is right next at the start of the street, and further down at the end, there's a homeowner with a pit bull that goes vivid, even if he hears me just wind. All their yard is covered in thick metals just for their dog to not see or bark at others. No residents can sort of confront to pass from there and enter my street. And if they do, trust me, you will hear them. That pit bull always goes extreme for any dog that might pass by and barks if he just hears them 2 blocks away. Between the start and the end of my street are exactly 6 and 6 houses opposite each other, and none of them connect to any other street or have dogs. Guess why? But me. Even if my dog goes more than 200 meters beside the pit bull's house, it goes vivid and barks all night. So as I'm reaching about halfway and looking at my dog, I always have my eyes on him because some neighbors kind of put poisoned food a while ago as bait and nearly got to him. He hears me, but not in regard of the food, so he's completely sort of demolish every single bite of anything he sees. Suddenly I see him frozen, looking at something, and he steps back and starts growling. He never growls, not even barks, so I raise my eyes and see the figure of an older mister with a leash and a dog on its end. The lamp of the street is exactly behind him, so I can only see black in his figure. I immediately turn to my dog and go, "Bad boy, don't growl." My dog's now in a normal state, and I turn and say, "I'm sorry that he barked at you, sir." With no more than a second, I raised my eyes and there was no one there. Like the guy I was talking to didn't even exist. I freaked out and rushed me and my dog home. If this mister was just a person walking his dog, he couldn't have come from the end of the street because the pit bull would have barked. And also, he couldn't have come from behind me because I would hear or see him as the figure was like 10 meters in front of me. None of my neighbors there are elderly or with dogs. So what the hell was that? My dog's never growled since then. My grandpa keeps pulling pranks from beyond. I moved in with my girlfriend a little over a month ago and brought a locket with my late grandfather's picture in it and a necklace that has some of his ashes. He died 5 years ago from lung cancer, and we were really close. Like, I was his favorite grandchild, and I stayed at my grandparents' house every weekend close. He was a kind and loving man and was much more of a father to me than my actual dad was. He also loved to joke around and pull little pranks on people when he was alive. Even when I visited him during his last days, he was in a good mood and made jokes with the nurses in the hospital room. I think he's still at his jokes in the afterlife. A couple of days ago, I was getting out of the shower and drying off with our electric toothbrush cleaner turned itself on, with no one pushing the button to activate it. I said, "Hi, Grandpa," after it happened and told him to please stop pulling pranks when I'm not dressed, and I instantly felt a warm tingling sensation on my body as if someone had hugged me. Then yesterday, my girlfriend called me while I was at work to tell me something else had happened. She and her mom got home from running errands, and my daughter's Kindle tablet turned itself on and started playing a Disney movie that she was watching before I took her to daycare on full volume. She said it didn't feel malicious, but still freaked her out a little bit. I told her that my grandpa loved to mess with people who were new to our family, and it seems he's still continuing at it as a ghost. The disturbing painting. This happened to me when I was around 6 or 7. I was sleeping in my parents' room because I had trouble sleeping alone. My parents' room is quite big with a double bed in the middle with a large full-body mirror to the left. Their room had lots of pictures and paints of tigers since they were my dad's favorite animal. One day I woke up to my mom and dad being gone, and it was just me in the room. The room was dead silent, except for a fan blowing. I woke up facing the mirror, and in the reflection I saw one of the paintings had deformed. It looked like a human face, but all mangled up. I was terrified, my eyes widened, and I hid under the blanket with my eyes poking out watching the painting. I couldn't move. It was terrifying just watching me through the mirror. I knew it was just a tiger picture, as I knew the room well since I grew up in the house, but I just felt like something changed. An hour goes by and I'm wide awake watching the painting, still looking in the exact same direction, even more terrified. My palms are getting sweaty from holding the cover so tightly over my head. Another half hour goes by and it still looks the same, but I muster up the strength to move the blanket and look at the painting dead on. I move the blanket, and I look to my right, and I see the painting looking like how it normally did. But all the fear I had just left my body as if the painting was feeding on the fear. I think back on that day and remember the fear I felt that painting still on the wall. And I sometimes look in the mirror to think what I could have saw, but I just see the tiger. I don't know what it was, but I was tired and my mind was playing tricks, or did something demonic enter the painting? And I just saw it showing itself to me. Weirdest stayover at my cousin's place. One of my cousins had recently moved to a new neighborhood, and she had a housewarming party. All of us cousins met after a long time. Our family is huge, so I have a lot of cousins. 8 of us decided to stay over and we smoked some weed and had a lot of fun. And then when we were all out of dopamine, we just sat there and talked for like 2 hours. One of the maids went inside a room, and we all saw her go in there as we were all sitting in the main hall. After a few minutes, the door slowly creaked open. They hadn't installed the doors for some reason, so they were just using some creaky old wooden doors for the time being. Not all of us noticed it until it slammed shut. That got all of our attention, and then it slowly started to open, creaking noisily, and it slammed shut again. And now we started to hear the maids' sort of bangles slamming against each other at crazy speed. In India, most of the middle-aged and old women tend to wear a lot of bangles on their hands. That was creepy, so we started calling out the maid's name. And that's when it got crazy. One of my cousins decided to go check what was happening, so he stepped into the room. And to his surprise, he didn't find anybody at all inside the room. There was no one, and he freaked out and ran back. We all went in and turned on the lights, searched everywhere, even though we already knew that there was no one in there. We were all creeped out. We went back out, started sort of try to make sense of it. We never really could. We had the most dedicated discussion of our lives at that point, and it went on for an hour or two. My cousin also said that she experienced some other unexplainable shit too in the past few days. She didn't expect it to happen with so many people in the house. So eventually, we all gave up on it, and some of the cousins decided to sleep. 4 of us, though, decided to go out for a night walk. This neighborhood was very weird. People were creepy, and the whole area was built on a hill or something, as it was so steep. It was literally like climbing up and down a hill. And we first saw an old woman walking up the hill. It was 3 a.m. and she was hunched like crazy. She moved in a creepy way, way past us. We were like, damn, okay. And then we turned a corner, and that street was the creepiest. People or shadows were looking at us from all the windows. First, I thought it might be the after effects of weed or something, but then all of us saw the people, so we were like, all right, let's take a turn around the corner. So we started walking faster, and then some woman comes out and throws a glass of water on us from the balcony. We were so confused why this neighborhood was so weird. We turned the corner and headed back and went past a black street dog. And when one of us were opening the gate slowly, so that we didn't disturb the whole neighborhood, we saw a dog, or its legs, moving in the shadows. Then we turned to our right, and that's when we saw at least 10 identical black street dogs just staring at us. That tripped us out, and we went in. One of us said that as we walked down that creepy street, more and more dogs started walking behind us. They kept increasing in number, according to him. But that shit tripped me out. Maybe those dogs could sense something weird in the neighborhood. Because, like, people say dogs can sense otherworldly shit. Maybe they were watching us. I don't know, but it was really creepy. We went back to the other cousin, who had decided to put out mattresses on the floor in the main hall. And we hadn't really slept, so we put it out there and decided to sleep. The next morning, everything felt better. We all told my cousin to move in again because this neighborhood was fucked up. Or rather, to move again because this neighborhood was fucked up. When we went home, the streets still were creepy. The kids were playing. Were still creepy. Not at all normal. And it was a wild sleepover altogether. And the maid had gone home that night. She never was there. So yeah, that's fucked up. Not sure what to think here. I'll start with some basic info before I begin the whole rundown. I currently live with my grandparents in the basement while I go to college. This house was built 30 years ago by my grandpa and great-grandpa, and my grandparents have owned it ever since. Other than our neighbor dying on the front lawn 20-ish years ago, nothing really traumatic has happened in the home. So this story begins really like 15 years ago when I was younger. I would have waited a little bit to recall these bad images that were in the corner of my eye that I would see. They were things in the house, and I would always see this sort of creepy smile. But other than that, I couldn't tell you if any of the other features were there. Also, sometimes at night you would hear toys in the game room being moved, like someone was playing with them. As I grew up, I still saw these things out of the corner of my eye in the house. The seeing things grew more and more as I got older, to seeing full-body moving things while out and about and in the house. Fast forward to 4 years ago after moving into the house. At first, nothing seemed really weird. I would see these things from time to time, but nothing really distressing, and I basically just began ignoring it. I started noticing things at night when I was sitting up in my living room in the dark, and I would get an uneasy feeling like someone was watching me. Specifically from the entire way of the game room, some nights I could rationalize things and be sort of fine, and other times I'd have to get up and turn the light on to make the feeling go away. 2 to 3 times a week, starting from when I moved in, I would wake up with an ungodly feeling that I was being very much watched in the middle of the night, only to have nothing there and just rationalize the feeling. I was chronically ill when I moved in and began to notice that when I would return home, my feelings and symptoms would get worse. I would immediately start feeling sick just pulling in the drive. Weird, but I chalked it up to stress and honestly didn't even notice it till my fiance pointed it out one night. I always complained more of being sick when I was home. Along with feeling extremely tired at home and sleeping significantly more, all of these things were weird but honestly could be ignored. It wasn't till about a year ago that things escalated. It started with things going missing for weeks at a time and eventually appearing again in very obvious spots. I would complain about it to my fiance, and he would joke that Casper was messing with me and thought it was just funny. It was annoying one time my toothbrush disappeared for 3 days and I found it in the gaming room. That lasted for about 3 months. That's when things got really weird. I would start hearing noises that I couldn't explain, like thumping. After thumping, it escalated to footsteps when I was alone or late at night. After Christmas, I had just gotten home and there was a loud crash at about 2 a.m. that startled me out of bed. I darted into the hallway to see what sort of maybe fell. I couldn't find anything. That's when I went upstairs to find all of my outside lights were on, when they were not on when I went to bed. I thought it was extremely weird, but I went back downstairs, rationalizing that my grandpa must have woke up and turned the lights on. When I got to the bottom of the stairs, I flipped the lights off and looked toward the game room that has a door in it that leads out, and noticed the door was slightly open. I didn't notice it before because when I came out of my room, I turned on all the lights. So it wasn't until the lights were off that I could see the outside lights peeking through the door. All thoughts of paranormal went right out the window. I ran back upstairs and woke my grandpa up, convinced someone broke into the house. The police came, and nothing was missing. The only thing disturbed was the door and the outside lights. From that night on, I double-checked to make sure all doors and windows that lead outside were locked. Takes up to roughly March, that takes us up to roughly March of this year. After the crash incident, things were quiet. Nothing went missing. There were no noises or thumps. I couldn't explain it. And then one night I was asleep on the couch at 2 a.m. I woke up to thumps, followed by what sounded like loud breathing right behind my ear. I immediately picked up my phone expecting to see some horrible thing behind me, but nothing. Freaked me out, and I went to my bedroom, locked the door behind me, and stayed up all night because I was so freaked out. About 2 weeks later, it happened again. Woken up in the middle of the night by thumping and breathing that sounded like it was right in front of me. But again, nothing. The same thing happened. I locked myself in my bedroom. Sometime in mid-May, it happened again at about 8 p.m. at night, except this time I had just gotten out of the shower and I had cracked the bathroom door while I got dressed. And I heard what I thought was breathing, but it was right outside the cracked door. I got so scared this time that I sort of fled my house with no shoes on and a t-shirt and underwear, because I was convinced someone was in my house. I made my fiance come back to the house with me to check my house and make sure no one was in there. He found nothing, and got my pants and shoes and slept at his house that night. I was convinced I was going crazy, and I still sort of think I am. Things died down 3 nights ago. I woke up at 4 a.m. with this terrible feeling of being watched and dread. I went and turned my lights on and noticed my bedroom door, that was closed when I went to sleep, was open about a foot. I shut the door and locked it, decently freaked out. There's been multiple times where I just didn't feel safe and had to sleep with my door locked to be able to go to bed. Well, tonight, I woke up at 3 a.m. sick to my stomach. I ended up rushing to my bathroom and vomiting. Not gonna lie, I was quite quick enough and ended up only getting about 80% of my vomit into the toilet and the rest on me. I didn't turn on any lights or close my bathroom door, so it was all dark. Because there was vomit now in my hair and on me, I needed to shower to get clean. I threw the dirty clothes in the sink and immediately got in the shower, keeping the lights off, hoping if I did, I wouldn't wake up anybody, or I'd just be able to go right back to bed after I had shampooed and cleaned my body. Still feeling queasy, mind you. I sat on the shower floor to gather my bearings while the warm water ran over my body. That's when I heard the thumps and the breathing. It sounded sort of far away, like it was in the doorway. The lights were off, and I couldn't see through my shower curtain to see if maybe I had woken up one of the grandparents with my vomiting. So I called out saying that I was sick and to go back to bed. I waited for a few seconds, and the breathing stopped. There was a loud crash in the bathroom, and everything was quiet. I opened the shower curtain, and my work phone, my personal phone, and my vape were now dangling off the countertop instead of on the counter where I had left them to charge the night before. I grabbed a towel and rushed into my bedroom where I'd been sitting and writing everything out to sort of figure out what the hell's going on and if I'm not crazy or if I need to move. This is not cool. I don't appreciate it, and I don't like the escalation on patterns. Breathing sounds that switch locations at night. I'm going to bed during the night. Everyone else has gone to bed. As I lay in my bed, I hear breathing sounds. Heavy, very human-sounding breathing sounds. They're coming from right outside my window. After a bit, I get up to look out my window, opening it. Now the breathing sound is coming from much farther away, from my neighbor's house, like 10, 15 meters away. It's the same human-sounding heavy breathing, but now it's got pretty much completely moved away from me. But nonetheless, I can still hear it very clearly. I close the window and get back into bed, and now the breathing has zipped right back. It's right outside my window. It seems to be right outside the glass. There's no mistaking it. I do this again 1 or 2 more times with the same result. Then, window closed, as I go into my bed once again, I hear the heavy breathing, but it's coming from right in my air vent. The air vent is situated on the floor, just before my bed, slightly to the right. It sounds as if there's an invisible face just behind the air vent screen. And this isn't air pumped from the vent, it's the exact same human-like heavy breathing. This goes on for some time, but later it switches to coming from my doorway. My door is open, by the way, leading to the dark corridor. It seems as if someone is standing right in the doorway, even though I can see that there's no one there. Not being able to do anything, I fall asleep. Anticlimactic, yeah, but what else am I supposed to do, honestly? Ever since, it's really never happened again, except that one night. I have no idea what caused it. It wasn't like I was sleep deprived or anything. I was perfectly awake and everything, not at all tired. Recent doppelganger encounter. Last Sunday was my second night back in my dad's house. I just moved back to avoid homelessness. and bide my time until I can leave town this fall. I woke up close to 5 a.m. after a particularly terrifying nightmare involving a demon. This demon had no clear form of its own. It would target one person exclusively and take on the form of its chosen victim and use fear to weaken them to make them easier to possess. Once possessed, they'd find that the demon was controlling them to move them somewhere more isolated, where it would then leave their body, scare them in the direction it wanted them to go, and finally kill them in some horrific way. I saw the demon do this to several people, possibly hundreds. The last one is the one I still remember. It was a woman maybe 5'2" with blue eyes and wavy blonde hair going on her shoulders. She wore a denim jacket with a black shirt. The demon was doing everything it could to terrify her in her own home before being possessed after several weeks. Once possessed, she found herself in an abandoned factory. Other people followed from a distance as the demon walked her into the building. Over the course of a few hours, the demon scared everyone who went in to help her. They scared them out of the area or killed them in front of the woman as she ran for safety further into the building until she was alone in the basement. Another hour or two passes before she finds herself at a dead end in a dimly lit room with a vertical shaft. The demon appeared as the woman to scare her one last time, causing her to fall backwards into the hole. She was able to stand up and saw that she was at least 9 feet below the floor of the same room above. The demon looked into the hole with a sickening grin, taunting the woman as she begged to get out and tried desperately to climb the wall to the top of the hole to no avail. The demon walked away, leaving the woman to die slowly, all alone in the shaft. Nobody to hear her screams. I woke up, bolted upright in my bed, and heard my own heavy breathing. Not just from myself, but also about 3 feet away beside my computer. I saw nothing, but whoever or whatever it was in my room with me, mimicking my breathing, only louder. It stayed for about 20 seconds before footsteps could be heard heading toward the door and toward the kitchen. I got out of bed, unlocked the door, and searched the whole house. Dad was still sound asleep, and everything seemed normal again. This hasn't happened since. I hope it doesn't again. Strange experience with shadow people. A couple of years ago, for the entire month of October, I'd have encounters with shadow people each time I went out at night for a walk around the neighborhood, to unwind before going to bed. Nobody would be around to see this due to how late it was, and I never felt afraid among them. Their presence was strangely comforting, but there was a weird smell whenever they showed up in large numbers. It's kind of like a mix of old tires and dead leaves, strong enough to be almost overpowering to me with my almost non-existent sense of smell. One of those nights in particular sticks out to me. I didn't even get 2 blocks away before the shadow people began showing up. They ran between trees and peeked out from everything they could hide behind. I immediately got the feeling that they were more playfully mischievous and mostly curious about me walking late at night outside alone. Suddenly I felt so different. I got the overwhelming sensation that I was no longer among the living, that I was one of the shadow people and could run with them indefinitely. I couldn't resist the urge to run, and I felt no exhaustion. While running in the dark around the neighborhood, I saw more shadow people appear, and I kept running faster and faster, feeling a euphoric rush of energy like I never had before. I no longer felt comforted by the presence of the shadows. It was replaced by a sense of kinship with them. More kept appearing. Eventually, a streetlight came on, and I felt my energy level drop while I became exhausted. The experience was over, except for shadow people still running everywhere. I went home as the shadows followed from a distance, wondering what just happened and waiting to experience it again. It hasn't happened before or since. I don't know what to think about it. From UFOs to shadow people, I hope you all had a good time listening. It's the end of our stories for tonight, and as usual, I thank you guys for sending me these and for giving me the opportunity to read them to you. And luckily, tonight, I didn't have anything strange happen while I was reading it, save for the odd gecko or dog barking in the distance on my end here. So, have a great night. See you next time. Thanks for watching Paranormal M and supporting the channel.
The tape recorder picked up voices, but no one was in the room. This is Paranormal M, where technology meets terror. Subscribe and hear what shouldn't exist. My sleep paralysis is very weird. This story is going to sound extremely fake. It was extremely weird and very made up. I'm an 18-year-old female, and this was happening around the age of 15. I used to have my own room. It was always pitch black at night. My light would never really work, but I was brave and it never bothered me, till I began having sleep paralysis. And this weird feeling that my soul was going to leave my body. And please believe me, this is scary. The first few nights in my room alone were great, until of course my light stopped working. I'd wake up at 3, exactly. I always had my phone right next to me, and at this time, I wasn't having the paralysis yet. It's just whenever I woke up, I felt strange. I can't explain it. Then the next week got really scary. I began having sleeping paralysis and I could move as usual. There's always some shadow standing either at the side of my bed or in front of me. I was always scared and I would always just pray. But then things got really weird. The next few days while sleeping on my stomach, I would hear this weird sound, like a fan blowing too loud in my ears, or the bad sound effects in a horror movie when a jump scare is about to happen. Then I would feel like I was sucked into a vacuum. I couldn't move and I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't breathe. Like my soul was being sucked out of my body. And I didn't like the feeling. Then I would scream and finally started moving. I don't know what it was, but I didn't like it. It kept on happening. Whenever I felt like I was almost out and the sound got too loud, I would just scream and force my body to get up. I don't know how to explain this, but I swear it's real. It just kept happening along with the sleeping paralysis. Then I suddenly stopped, and that's when I got my lights back. Had it on through the night, and it stopped. But one night, something weird happened. My lights went out again, so I decided to sleep on the floor in my living room with my sisters. We have our own room, we just decided to do that. 3 a.m. again, I woke up and stretched. But when I looked back, I literally saw myself sleeping, like me. I don't know if I was dreaming or if it was real. I don't know, I couldn't tell. It felt real though. When I looked back, I saw gnomes, like garden gnomes, like 8 of them, standing there. I was clearly confused, and then they began moving and pulling out a knife and charged at me. But then I woke up, same way. Looked back, didn't see myself, so I don't know. It happened again, but I didn't see anything. I just laid down and woke up the same way. Recently I got the sound, like, happened again, that vacuum feeling, like I was drifting away from my body, and my sisters would say I would jerk up screaming and breathing hard every 5 minutes like I was dying. That doesn't sound good. Shadow figure manifested. I live in an old compound house in South India, in Chennai. I moved in 6 months ago. Approximately 3-year-old female cat was abandoned by the neighbor. He took it in after it became too thin, was remaining here, and was kind of out in our property. Well, to our surprise, it was spayed and litter trained. It's been 3 months since we adopted the cat. She's very calm and quiet and doesn't even disturb anyone. But sometimes she'd wake me to go into the lawn in the middle of the night, and I'd open the door and wait for her, and I've had the feeling of being watched several times in the middle of the night when I'm with the cat. And that's either if I'm in the lawn or the backyard garden. There's an old lady who lives alone across the street. She's a tantric, an ancient Indian diverse method of occult and spiritual practices of Hinduism and Buddhism. Every single day she stands in front of her house gate and screams and yells at something. Actually, no one. She yells to leave or to get lost. Few people in the neighborhood said she lost her mind years back after her husband passed away. I didn't take her seriously until I would see something move in the corner of my eye and hear footsteps in the garden. I started restricting the cat to not go in the middle of the night. Now, coming to my, actual experience. It was raining for 2 days. And the cat didn't step out. I already have a litter box inside the home. When the downpour stopped, she woke up at 1:50 a.m. I opened the door for her and stood in the lawn. She went to the backyard, and I heard her make a strange noise and casually walked toward her. And as soon as I made a left turn from the house toward the backyard, I saw a dark spot at the end of the compound wall. The dark spot became a human-shaped figure in less than a second, and it was huge, covering the wall from top to bottom. The height of the wall is 11 feet, and the sky was clear after it rained, and the moon was bright that day. And I stood there like 20 seconds until the cat ran back, past me and into the home, and I ran back inside. Now, I was contemplating what it was for 2 days, since I knew what I saw and it wasn't my imagination or some kind of an illusion. My dad came up to me last night and said he heard a loud bang in the backyard around 2:30 a.m. Went out to see what it was. When he turned on the backyard light, he saw a dark figure disappear around the same spot I saw it. Told him to brush it off and it's just an illusion. And I've been outside many times in the middle of the night. It's always peaceful outside. There's never anything to worry about. I don't want my parents to panic or live in fear. And I don't know what should I do, since sometimes I go out of town for work, and that lady who practiced some rituals every day made a lot of noise screaming outside. No one does anything in the neighborhood. Many times people called the police on her in the past, and the police determined that she's an old mentally unstable lady. Stopped responding. I have cameras in the front of the house and plan to add additional CCTVs that'll cover the backyard and the whole compound. Now, should I call in a priest and cleanse the house spiritually? Wendigo of the North. Wendigo of the North, a popular mythological cannibalistic monster in the spiritual tradition of the North American Algonquin-speaking tribes. According to many people, it is a malevolent spirit that possesses humans and increases their desire to feed on human meat to such an extent that it's the only thing they can really think of. They walk like zombies. Many believe this is all just a mental disorder which they call the Wendigo psychosis. Wendigo psychosis. Wendigo psychosis can be seen as a culture-bound syndrome in which individuals may believe they're possessed by the Wendigo, a cannibalistic creature featured in Algonquin tribal folklore. This creature is sometimes also referred to as the Wendigo or Witico. Prevalence rates of Wendigo psychosis aren't clear, but some sources report that there may have been as many as 70 cases in the 60s. It's not known for sure whether Wendigo psychosis should be considered a mental illness or the result of a certain cultural belief and behavior. History of the Wendigo. The oral stories of the Wendigo have been passed down for a very long way before the Europeans arrived in Northern America. But the first written mention of the Wendigo of the North dates back to around 1636. It's a report by Paul Le... I'm not good at French. Paul Le Jeune, a French Jesuit missionary living among the Algonquin people in what is now Quebec. Le Jeune described a woman who warns of an Achen that had eaten some tribal members nearby, and that would, quote-unquote, eat a great many of them if we were not called elsewhere. A few instances of murder and cannibalism in North America were blamed on the Wendigo. These included a case in Alberta, Canada in 1879, where a Cree hunter and trapper named Swift Runner claimed a Wendigo spirit had entered his dream, told him to eat his family. He was tried for murder, found guilty, and hanged for his crime later that year. And another case occurred in 1907 among the Sandy Lake First Nation community in northern Ontario. The tribal shaman, Jack Fiddler, and his brother Joseph Fiddler were charged with the murder of Joseph's daughter-in-law, whom they had strangled to prevent her from becoming possessed by a Wendigo. After the brothers' arrest, Jack Fiddler escaped. He escaped the police and just strangled himself, and Joseph Fiddler died from tuberculosis in prison in 1909. By the early 20th century, the term Wendigo psychosis was being used by psychologists and missionaries to describe a culture-bound syndrome among Native and First Nations people. People whose symptoms included delusions of becoming possessed by an evil spirit, depression, violence, a compulsion for human flesh, and in some cases cannibalism. The syndrome was also diagnosed retroactively in historical cases of cannibalism in North America. However, the existence of the syndrome is disputed by some scientists. Below is a map where the tribes that have Wendigo in their culture believe the Wendigo stays. I want to see this map. Some descriptions of the Wendigo seem to suggest that it could have the ability to shapeshift, which seems to be similar to a skinwalker of the Navajo. According to the Navajo tribes, that's like a witch. It has the ability to take form of the last person or animal they killed. In other words, they wear the skin of their prey. I have experienced someone getting possessed. Earlier today, I was at my grandma's house. That's when she brought this up, and it made me think about it a lot. So for background, I grew up very Catholic. I'd go to the church every week, and my grandma as well as my cousins were all very involved with the church. Often, Some of my mom's family would gather together and pray the rosary, or just to pray. One day we all went to go to pray at my uncle's house. To pray. And that's when I first saw their son. I'm going to call him Josh, not his real name. I watched Josh get possessed. As we were all praying, and Josh would basically start to make distorted noises like growling or very unnatural breathing. When this would happen, all the grown-ups and parents would basically have to sit him in a chair while holding him down while they throw holy water at him and pray very loudly, demanding for the demon or spirit to leave his body. I remember me and my cousins would all get sent to one of the cousins' rooms and would have to also pray. Mind you, at the time, I was very young and scared. I was around 8, and my cousins were either my age or only a couple years older. It was very scary, and I had no idea what was going on, but after a couple of hours, Josh would go back to normal, and we would go home. I remember asking my grandma what happened because, like I said, I was very young, so I couldn't really grasp everything. She told me that my uncle's family had been dealing with it for a while, and it started happening after Josh played with the Ouija board. This didn't only happen once when I was around another time. This didn't only happen once when I was around another time. I was at my grandma's house with all my cousins, and this time it was really scary. Me and all my girls' cousins were at my grandma's rooming, watching TV. I was on the couch with my little sister on my lap. She was like 3 at the time. I was with my oldest cousins on the bed next to me, and the rest of my cousins and older sister on the floor. I don't know how exactly Josh got possessed again because, well, I wasn't in the room, but all I know is that it happened. And this time it was violent, and he was apparently throwing rocks. Next thing I know, my oldest cousin, best to me, passes out. And immediately the rest of my cousins and sister went to go get one of our parents upstairs, or somebody to tell them. I was left alone when my cousin passed out next to me, and a child on my lap, and I'm not even joking, the lights started flickering on and off. I was so scared at the time I didn't know what to do, and I was just struck. I don't know what else to do but just sit there. Like 5 minutes after, somebody comes into the room, and eventually the ambulances are just outside for my older cousins. Those were the only times I remember it happening, and all I know is it happened to many other times and I wasn't there. But Josh eventually got exorcised. We never really talked about it again. I'd be talking about that all over the place. But who am I? I think I saw a ghost, but I don't know if I'm overthinking it. Back when I was around 13 or 14, me and my cousin had a massive obsession with exploring abandoned places. Considering we live in the suburbs of Melbourne, we're only really limited to abandoned houses. I was over at my cousin's house for a sleepover. We were having a barbecue for dinner. My uncle told us to get some lemons from one of the neighbors' lemon tree in their backyard. The reason we stole their lemons was because the house had been abandoned for years, and both my uncle and my auntie had told us that the homeowner, an old woman, had died a few years back. So, therefore, we would always go into the backyard to take some lemons. We'd never actually been inside. Being dumb teenagers who were obsessed with exploring abandoned houses, we decided that day we would also explore inside. It was an old brick house. It looked like it was built in the 70s. While we were picking the lemons, we checked all the windows to see if anybody was inside. Of course, it was empty, as it was abandoned after all. And after delivering the lemons, we went to the front door. I banged on the door and yelled if anybody was home for a solid 2 minutes just in case. There's no answer, so now it was time for entry. The flywire door was unlocked, but the normal wooden front door was locked. But it was locked by one of those old locks where there's like a pin that you just have to slide across from the inside. I managed to open the door slightly and fit my hand through the gap and unlock the door. We were inside mucking around for about 5 minutes and the house was empty with only a couple of pieces of furniture. One of those being an old piano. While playing the piano and making quite a lot of noise, we noticed faint music playing from inside the house and we could hear it from the start. We just never really thought about it until now. It was creepy, so we went to investigate the rest of the house by following the sound of the music. We ended up getting to a closed door with a light shining through the bottom. It was the sunlight from the window. It legit left like we were in a horror movie. I opened the door and there was an old lady sitting facing away from us with a music box playing on the table. This was really weird since we had legit looked into this room from the window when we were getting the lemons, and there was no one inside. The lady legit looked dead, so I panicked and asked, "Are you okay?" to the lady. I got no response, so I thought, holy crap, she's dead. I got closer and I asked again. Still no response. I asked a final time and she stood up and turned around. Genuinely, she looked so horrible. I could tell it was not a homeless person or a squatter, based on how clean and expensive her clothes looked, but her face was pale and looked like a corpse. She turned around and screamed, "Who the hell are you?" And we just ran. Back in my cousin's house. And I don't know if I saw the ghost of an old lady or if she was never dead, but during dinner, we asked my uncle about the lady again. He said she'd been living in an old people's home for about 4 years prior to her death, and he knew she was dead because he would go and visit her from time to time. June 13th, 2024. The visitor outside my door. Weird incident and confusing answers. This happened on June 13th, 2024. And for some context, I lived alone during my final semester of college in a small rented room. The structure had 4 floors. It was built onto a slope in a hilly region. The topmost floor, which was actually the entrance level, was where the landlord stayed. Below him lived his brother, and the remaining 2 floors were rented out to students. It was a simple space, a single room with an attached bathroom. The door was flimsy and the walls were chipped and peeling. It was concerning, but I didn't complain. I was almost done with college and figured I'd just stick it out. Around 11 p.m., I'm chatting with my friend online when a sudden loud bang scared the heck out of me. Quickly hurried to wear some trousers. It was hot, so I was only wearing a t-shirt. Don't judge me. I'm not. First thought, maybe it was one of the other tenants. Second thought is an intruder or burglar maybe. I was also about to open the door when I froze. My whole body was telling me to avoid it. The bangs were as if somebody was trying to break in. The same motion when you try to open a locked door. And after a while, the noise stopped and I thought, okay, whatever that was, it's gone. But then, around 11:45, it happened again. This time it was shorter and I grabbed a kitchen knife for protection, in case it was a burglar, and I stepped out. Nothing. No one. Just stillness and silence. I checked the whole floor and there was no one. Turns out the other tenants who shared my floor had gone home earlier. The only people in the building were the landlord, his family, and the guy that lived downstairs. I quickly walked inside and locked the door. Fuck this shit. I'm not gonna risk it. Fast forward to 4 a.m. The same loud bang woke me up. I was half asleep, but I recorded a video. And this time I got the courage to open the door, and behold, there was a dog outside, just sitting there. Not barking, not scratching, no sound. Just sat and stared at me. So I calmed down thinking, oh, it's just a dog. Decided to sleep. And that's when the dog started scratching on my door. Walked out again, led the dog to the top floor. Since the gate was locked, I decided to let it out. But then it hit me. This time it was the dog. I heard the distinct sound of dog-style breathing and the way it moved and whimpering to be let out or in. It only pushed on the door with its body, nothing like the previous ones, push and pull types. And the other bangs before that, nothing, with no footsteps and no scratching and nothing. 14th of June, 2024. Around 7 a.m., my gas cylinder starts leaking. So I got help from the guys that lived downstairs. While we were talking, I casually asked if they heard anything last night. And one of them told me, yeah, I thought it was that dog. It was like lying on the stairs in the morning. Later, I went to my friend's place. And I showed her. And I also showed her mom, actually, that video. My friend and her mom, both of them were terrified. She told me, you should talk to somebody. This isn't normal. I went to a temple first, but it was closed, and then a mosque, and no Malvi there, and is that how you say that? Finally, found another mosque, told the Malvi what happened, asked my full name and my parents' names. And then he told me that wasn't a dog, it wasn't human either. It was something that didn't belong to this world trying to play around. Beware. The people around you aren't as good as they seem. They sent this. Since you didn't let it in, you'll be fine. Take this and put this under your bed. You'll be fine, don't be scared. Later, while I was laughing about it with the guys from my building, I noticed something weird. The wooden door with the Indian-style lock had small scratches under it. Wasn't there when I went to college yesterday. I don't know of any dog that would like to scratch under the lock, and I'm not sure it can even do it. It was kind of deep, and I also forgot the dog's face. It's all blurry in my mind. I could blame it on stress or whatever, but I'm not sure. This whole ordeal scared me to death, and I couldn't sleep the following day. When I made sure I was safe, only then could I sleep peacefully. Something climbed on top of me in my dorm room. It was while I was alone, and it wasn't human. I've had several supernatural experiences throughout my life. They started when I was a kid, and they followed me into adulthood. I've always wanted to share one of the scariest, most unforgettable things that have ever happened to me. And this is real. I'm not exaggerating or trying to scare anyone. My earliest memory of something strange was around the age of 6 or 7. I had a lot of insomnia as a kid, largely because my father was abusive and felt like I had to protect my mom. I was the oldest, and I often stayed up while my younger siblings slept. One night, I'm lying in bed wide awake. That's when I felt something grab my hand. My arm had been hanging over the edge of the mattress, and I felt something physically grip me in the dark. After that, I started sleeping with my mattress pushed against the wall to my back. People warned me about bugs, but honestly, I preferred that over ghosts. Later, my sister told me she once saw a shadow figure, a tall, man-like entity standing over me while I slept. She had gone to the bathroom at night and peeked into my room on her way back. She ran to her room, terrified. Years later, my mom told us that she also regularly saw a dark presence in that house. She never told us when we were kids because she didn't want to scare us. And I've always had sleep paralysis. As a kid, I would scream internally while being completely paralyzed. I could see the room, I could see people nearby, but no one could hear me. One time, I'm on the couch, I'm stuck in sleep paralysis. I'm looking at my mom across the room, trying to scream for her. She didn't hear me, and I told her about it, and being Southern, she just said, "A witch was riding your back," and to just pray. I eventually learned not to sleep on my back. It seemed to trigger it, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened my freshman year of college. I had moved into a dorm with a roommate. Her grandfather passed away just 3 days after we moved in. I had met him, and he was in our room helping her unpack. Not long after that, she told me she saw something non-human on my side of the room. She didn't give a lot of detail, but said the energy felt dark. And after that, she was rarely around, and eventually moved out before the semester ended. One night, I was alone in my room, in the dorm. Struggling to sleep like usual, I decided to, pleasure myself. It usually helped me fall asleep faster. Midway, though, I suddenly felt the warm, heavy weight of a person on top of me. I could feel hands on me, caressing me and groping me. And I was frozen. I couldn't move, I couldn't speak. It felt like sleep paralysis, but so much worse. I could feel this thing gripping my thighs and touching my chest, and I couldn't do anything, and eventually I mustered enough strength to grab what felt like a shoulder, broad and muscular, and then vanished. In an instant, the weight was gone. I jumped out of bed and searched the room. Nothing and no one. The door was locked, windows were shut, and I lived on the 6th floor. No one was in there but me. After that, I couldn't sleep in the dark anymore. I avoided that dorm like the plague and stayed at home as much as I could. When I told my doctor about it, he didn't even question the story. He told me it was spiritual and that no medicine could help me. He looked concerned and didn't prescribe anything. Some people say this was an incubus. Others say it was trauma or sleep paralysis or even my roommate's energy attracting something. All I know is it was real, and it was physical. I felt it. No amount of logic can explain it away. Has anybody else experienced something like this? Does anybody know what this could have been? Yikes. Still, don't know what happened to me that night. Sleep paralysis or something way darker. This happened to me when I was around 17, and at the time I was really involved in church and part of a youth group in my local Christian community. Like in many churches, they'd occasionally invite pastors or ministries from other places to hold special events. One time they invited a ministry from another state for a weekend of quote-unquote miracles, healing, and deliverance. But what really stood out was this one guy they brought along. He had a testimony that, honestly, felt straight out of a horror movie. He claimed he had once been deeply involved in satanic practices, even getting close to becoming a kind of priest for a group like that. According to him, just before completing a ritual that involved a sacrifice, he had a powerful encounter with God and left that life behind. But the really disturbing part was what he said that came after. He talked about being tormented for years, waking up literally stuck to the wall with his chest scratched and bleeding. And how during exorcisms, demons would speak through other people and call him by his full name, begging him to come back. As wild as it sounds, he shared it all with this dead serious tone and this heavy stare that honestly made you feel like something was still with him. During the event, a lot of people were saying they got healed or delivered from stuff. The whole atmosphere was intense, and being near that guy felt strange. Like there was some sort of energy hanging around him that made you uncomfortable in a way you couldn't explain. Anyway, a couple of nights after the event, I'm in my room around 9 p.m., just lying in bed with the lights off, getting ready to sleep. Everything was normal until I heard something super clear in my right ear. The sound of pages being blown violently by the wind. And suddenly, that sound filled the entire room. And then I wasn't in my... Excuse me. That was weird. And then I wasn't in my room anymore. Found myself standing in what looked like a forest surrounded by lit candles arranged into a circle. I was in the middle, and then slowly these people started to appear, all wearing black robes with their faces covered. The last one to show up was holding a huge book, like an ancient and almost alive-looking book. He placed it into a stand and started reading it out loud in some language I couldn't understand, but it felt wrong, really wrong. I was frozen in fear, and all I could think to do was pray as hard as I could. I begged God to get me out of there. And then this strong wind started blowing, knocking over the candles one by one. The pages of the book began to tear out and catch fire in the air. The next thing I knew, I was back in my bed, but I wasn't in the same position I'd fallen asleep in, and I was completely paralyzed and couldn't move a muscle. Felt like something was still in the room with me. And in Mexico, where I'm from, we have a name for this. Which, I'm terrible at Spanish. But anyway, I'll go for it. Se te subió el muerto, which means the dead sat on you. It's what people call sleep paralysis because it feels like a heavy presence is sitting on your chest, keeping you from moving. That was the only time in my life I've ever experienced it, and it felt like something came back with me. Like whatever I saw wasn't just a dream. After maybe 15 seconds, which felt like forever, I suddenly felt this thing leave my body. I could finally move again. I was sweating and completely freaked out. I didn't sleep properly for days. And I know how insane this sounds, like something straight out of a movie or badly written creepypasta. But it is 100% the real deal. As ridiculous as it may sound, it actually happened to me. And to this day, I still don't have a solid explanation for it. A floating Cheeto. I grew up in a Christian household. My parents are pastors, so Sundays were always spent at church. And over the years I learned one thing. Churches see some strange cases, and this was one of them. When I was a teenager, a family came to church looking for help for their oldest daughter, a 15-year-old girl. 15 isn't the age you'd expect to hear about imaginary friends. But that's exactly what she claimed to have. Her parents had already taken her to doctors and psychiatrists. No schizophrenia, no mental illness. Nothing. Out of options, they came to us, thinking maybe something darker was at play. With other people, she seemed completely normal. I'd seen her at youth gatherings, talking and laughing like any other teen. But at home, things were different. One night, my dad told us that we'd been invited to dinner by a new family in the church. When we arrived, I realized it was her house. From the moment we stepped inside, I felt it, a heaviness in the air, like the walls themselves were breathing slowly around us. They were in the living room watching a movie, a bowl of hot Cheetos on the table. I was about to sit on the couch when she stopped me. "You can't sit there, my friend's sitting there." I awkwardly sat on the other end. Minutes later, she announced, almost casually, "He doesn't like you. He wants you to leave." Her parents scolded her, telling her not to be rude, so she shrugged and said, "It's not me, it's what he wants." Then came the part that still makes my stomach knot. She told us we could have some Cheetos. I took a few, and her brother did too. Then she turned to the empty space beside her and said, "Do you want some?" She paused and nodded to no one and then said, "Everything that's mine is his too." And that's when it happened. A single Cheeto. It rose slowly from the bowl. No strings, no tricks, just floating. Ridiculous, right? Well, a flying Cheeto sounds like a joke, but I swear on my life we all saw it. My family, her family. And as it hovered there, it began to disappear like something invisible was eating it. The room grew heavier. Her expression darkened, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed and was deeper and colder. Not like the cheerful girl I'd seen before. She said that we should leave and that he was angry. My dad didn't argue. Not because he was afraid, but because he believed that we were dealing with something demonic. This wasn't the right time or place to confront it. We left that night with more questions than answers. 2 weeks later, they attempted a deliverance. It lasted 5 or 6 hours, and supposedly she stopped seeing him. But as time passed, she got involved with a cult. Eventually, she didn't survive. And I'll never forget what somebody told me after. Before deliverance, the person has to want to be free. If not, when it comes back, it's always worse. Something weird happened at my nanny's house. Still freaks me out. So I'm Saira, a 21-year-old female from Pakistan. And this happened when I was like 16. We were visiting my nanny's house. It's in a small town in Sindh for summer holidays. It's one of those really old houses, long hallways, high ceilings. Kind of pretty, but always low-key creepy at night. Super quiet there, peaceful but scary. There's this one room with an old wooden almirah. It's like a safe in the corner. Nobody ever really used it. I remember once my nanny randomly saying something like, I'm just going to translate this. There's a little knife's story in that almirah, but she didn't explain and I didn't really ask. Anyway, one night me and my cousin were up watching some drama on my phone. It was around 2:30 a.m. or something, and suddenly we heard this soft knock from inside the almirah. At first we thought maybe it was a mouse or something, so we ignored it. But it happened again, and this time it was like 3 slow knocks from the inside. We literally froze, We heard this really faint sound, like something slowly dragging their nails on the inside of the wood. Not fast, just slow and creepy. We didn't even put on chapels, some sort of shoe. We ran to the other room where my mom and Kala means sister of mother in our language, so like her aunt, where they were sitting, and we told them what happened and they didn't say much, but my mom looked kind of serious, and later they went to check, so they opened the wooden almirah and it was empty. Just this old white dupada hanging on a rusty hook. Next morning we told Nani and she just smiled and said, I'll just try it. Wo almari purani hai uzmayin purani chizian reti hain. Chizian. Which translates to, it's an old wooden locker. Old things live in there. I definitely said all of that wrong. I didn't get a single word correct anyway. After that, I never went to that room again, and even now when we visit, I just avoid it. Maybe it was nothing, but it didn't feel like nothing. What do you people think about this? Well, I know I can't pronounce anything well other than most English, not all of it. Most. I'll take it. Personally, everything feels sort of strange these days, and everything just feels off to me. I feel like people don't really know why they're doing things anymore. I agree. I just watched a video of a popular rock band playing their music, and there doesn't seem to be as much zest to it as in previous years. Almost as if the reasons they made their music or what rose them to fame are just no longer relevant anymore. A lot of the adults I know in their 60s just fervently defended the government and status quo during the pandemic. However, when the truth has come out, there is a lot of people being disingenuous, to put it one way. And a few scandals coming out about members of the government breaking the lockdown rules in the UK at least. One was caught on camera having an affair while telling the country to social distance, and the party was held with no social distancing whatsoever. However, now they just sort of look lost, like a bunch of children wandering around the playground looking at their feet. No fever, zealousness for life. Just depression and disappointment and confusion. Then there are many people fervently clinging on to the past and their beliefs and desires, desperately clinging on to cultures or cultural icons from 20 years ago that are long since irrelevant. Not always true. People just doing drugs and drinking alcohol to numb themselves from the reality of whatever is really going on. All the bizarre political events occurring, not commenting, just stating. Whatever the F is going on in the USA, it feels like a million miles away. The USA never felt so culturally different to the UK as it does now. I have very, very little understanding or idea why things are happening in the USA in the way that they are currently. Then there's all of this spirituality. I've heard loads of stuff about bloody planets aligning and energetic frequencies changing and transitioning from 3D into 4D. Additionally, for me, I would likely be dead within a few months if I hadn't found Alcoholics Anonymous and spirituality when I did. I was going down a route of isolated alcohol and drug addiction until I found these services. Yet it feels like I'm living a life in a bubble now. Like, there are those that get it and those that don't, and those that see the weird changes in society, and those just going through the motion, hoping for the best. As I said, I would likely be dead by now if it wasn't for AA and such, and feels like my family at least don't give an F. None of them did anything when I was clearly sinking lower and lower. They just sort of sat around hoping for the problems to go away and solve themselves. Not all of them, but a fair few. I've spoken to some of them recently, having been going to AA meetings for a few weeks, and they sort of were just like, nice, good for you. Then swiftly moving on, thank fuck you're not gonna die anymore. Is this just what used to happen when these people know problems just solving themselves, like a great bunch of adults that abandon their children to fend for themselves after dumping years of abuse and trauma onto them? There's a fair few people who seem to have stepped up to the plate and are trying to be grown-ups. I continue on with whatever new society is emerging. I know of many community figures and nurses and doctors and such who've stood up and tried to address the issues that I've been having. Perhaps we're just at a pivotal point in the history, or at least near history, where the UK at least is divided into those who stepped up and those who cowardly clung to the past. I have all kinds of comments. But an overarching comment is, yeah, the medical system in most of the world is pretty horrible. I can say that cleanly. What if something followed me since childhood? What I saw defies explanation. Since I was little, I've had intense sleep problems. Frequent sleep paralysis and hallucinations like faces in the walls and voices in the room. And reoccurring nightmares. Very early on, my relationship with sleep became a struggle. But it's not just in my head. One of the most memorable memories, an electronic car that drove itself in my room. My mother took out the batteries, but the car continued to run. This kind of phenomenon has happened several times. Around the age of 14, when my grandmother died, the strange events intensified for a few weeks. Lights turned on by themselves, and doors were slamming and unexplained noises in the house. Shortly after, I was in a relationship with a girl who lived in the countryside. At home, too, phenomena began to appear. Children's toys turned on by themselves without batteries. Voices were heard in the house, and it was no longer just me. My mother, my brother, my sister, and even her family witnessed it. And later, in another relationship, it happened again, but even stronger. Traces of blood appeared in the garage door without explanation. And there were noises, unnatural drafts, and even once, the front door closed by itself and locked itself, locking us out when no one was inside. What's disturbing is that these phenomena sometimes seem to react to my emotions. When I'm very angry, the lights crackle. I even saw an ashtray flying through the air before my eyes without explanation. My mother also experiences things. She was pushed into her house with no one around, and we ended up calling a priest because the atmosphere is becoming unbearable. I'm a Muslim, my mother's not, but we did what we could. For the past few days, I have the impression that it's starting again. Last night, my girlfriend had a terrifying nightmare about spirits. She cried when she woke up, and she dreamed that I was showing her something in the bathroom. She was dreaming that she couldn't turn on the light, that she felt me touching her, except it wasn't me. And in the dream, no one believed her except me. I don't know if someone's sensitive to these energies, or if I am. Not trying to exaggerate or create buzz, I just want to understand. Like, am I crazy, or is it spiritual? Has anybody here experienced the same thing? Calls from the woods. We have a few acres that border a state forest. I've gone in the forest twice, and while hiking I noticed that not only was there no wildlife, but my voice echoed through that woods and bramble like it was an empty hallway that went on forever. I could hear the echo for at least 10 seconds. Well, I've had 2 occasions where my wife's voice called me from the backyard deep into the woods, and every time I went inside and asked her if she'd called me, she said no. When I was 5, I used to live in an old farmhouse, where to go upstairs you had to go past the front door. One night as I went to walk up, I heard my mother call my name from the other side of the door at 10 p.m. I went in the kitchen, and she was still making my juice for the night. I knew whatever is on the other side of the door wanted me to open it. My current house is not haunted, and my family farmhouse is 10,000% haunted. Can't even go over the things I experienced. Heat seizures and extreme fear of windows, and a witch that would come in my window. I would scream while still being asleep, and I had to be woken up by being shaken. Once we moved, all the effects stopped. Whatever the entity was, it tormented me. And our family dog died while I was at my dad's for the weekend, and it showed up in my dreams. I was all sad until the dog started talking in this deep voice and would chase me and said it would devour me. Jesus. When I lived in the farmhouse, I'd have dreams of dying over and over again until I found a way to get out of my dreams by finding a TV in my dream and turning it off. Any idea on the entity from the woods? The entity in the farmhouse was potentially my great-great-grandmother, whom everybody said was the meanest person they'd ever met. My wife has even witnessed me as a doppelganger. She watched me walk toward the front door with my joint, and she asked where I was going. My doppelganger looked at her and went outside. She followed, and there was no one. When she came in the room and asked what was wrong and why she was calling me, she said she watched me walk out the front door. And this was at my mother's house, which was a house that was built in the 1800s and was also very haunted. Doors being pushed right up against the door jamb, foot shadows standing at the doors. I got so sick of it, I started throwing a towel over the door. Tenants were hearing walking around and doors closing when we're both gone, and I've got lists of paranormal things happening in both family houses. Seems like my new house from the 1800s isn't haunted, but the woods are really weird. And I have 2 massive mounds in my backyard that have alternating layers of shale and soil. The lady who sold us the house talks about this massive bowl-shaped rock and Native Americans, but I didn't take much count of that. I've left the mounds alone aside from getting rid of vines. Ideas or thoughts, like I know this is a word salad, but any opinions on the woods calling me would be great because I'm very tempted to go see who's calling me. Wouldn't be the first time. Maybe I was being called and confronted it. Me and my husband are genuinely worried. What does it want? Genuine advice, please. We both have experienced a lot of different things during our 2 months we've lived in our new home. We live with a roommate who's rarely home and is never here during the time these happen. So we know it's not him. Things that have happened have all started within the past 4 to 5 days, getting progressively worse. And it started with my husband seeing a weird car pull up to the house. When he went to go investigate it, the black figure that was at the door both hid it, and the car vanished within the 2 seconds it took him to make the 5-step stairs down to the door. The things that are doing it include unlocking doors, and we're certain we locked them before, knocking over candles with large bass fans, or knocking over candles and large bass fans and a PS4 in a bass it shouldn't have been able to push, and throwing phones across the room, both of ours. But the spookiest thing that's happened so far that I'm personally really scared of is its escalation. Today, while I'm writing this post, it's because as I was about to walk out of the room to take a shower, we both heard knocks at the bathroom window, knocking 5 times repetitively and loud, making me think it couldn't have been absolutely anything else. The bathroom in question's on the 2nd floor. I get over the dread I feel and I go to take my shower, agreeing with my husband that we'll leave both the doors to the room and the bathroom open. The noise happens again, and this time near the kitchen somewhere. I scream for him and I ask him to stay with me, to which he agrees. He sits on the toilet with the cover on and I'm still showering. As he stays in here, he locks the bathroom door. This is very important. Throughout the time in the bathroom, the knocks happened 3 more times, all 5s all over the house, the last one being the bathroom door. Scarily loud. We're both freaked out and out of our minds. And that's when the bathroom door unlocks by itself. He immediately runs over and fixes it, but not even a few minutes later it happens again. This time I'm out of the shower, so I go try it, but it won't turn either way and locked again. Like the lock is stuck. When I call my husband over to inspect it with me, it immediately and smoothly locks easily with my turn. Like something stopped holding it. I don't know what can do about this, or really what to do about this. don't know how to feel about it. Can anybody give us any advice on how to go about this? Our plan so far is to get cameras for proof, and I've salted the doors to the bathroom and the bedroom, but that's it. Tucson Haunted House. Around 13 years ago, I lived in Tucson. I'd moved there for a relationship that ended up not working out for many, many reasons. When me and this person were first talking, they never mentioned they were living with their mom and grandma. So when I flew there to move in, it was definitely a surprise that there was family there too. Luckily, they welcomed me. The house was on the outskirts of Oro Valley, right up next to a mountain. The house was definitely built in the 70s and had a lot of interesting things about it. The layout of the house was weird and the front part was pretty normal, but the back of the house was strange. The room we stayed in was basically a room-sized closet with no windows. There was a room next to this room, also without windows but much larger. But this room was used for storage. You can get to the larger room from either this room or walking through the kitchen and around the sunroom like a circle. The sunroom was off to the side of the kitchen, and it was the length of the entire house and had full windows that look out to the desert. So definitely it could be creepy at night. At first, I didn't understand why no one was really allowed to go into that room until I started noticing things. It wasn't a strict rule, but they just encouraged you to avoid going in there. I've experienced the paranormal my entire life, so I pick on these things quickly. Started with me going in that room to get to the laundry room. It was faster than walking all the way around. But every time I went in there, the temperature would very noticeably drop. You'd get this intense feeling if somebody was watching you from somewhere. A deep feeling of uneasiness. I later found out that the mom used to stay in that room when she was addicted to heroin. Her and a friend would use for days locked up in there. And I have a feeling the usage of drugs contributed to the negativity that was in this house. So it made sense to me why this room had such a bad energy. I've lived in haunted houses throughout my life, and this one was on the top 3 most memorable. Started going to a cosmology school and would use the sunroom to study. I don't really know why, but this family had like 10 couches in the sunroom. One night I was there studying, and I'm curled up in one of the couches under a lamp when I see from the corner of my eye a ball of light. It flew from a corner. It came flying right into my face. I immediately threw my books across the room and ran into the bedroom where my partner was. That orb was so bright I had star-like vision, like if somebody shined a flashlight in my eyes. Another night we're laying in bed. All the lights are off, and the only light in the room is coming from the little sort of light on the VCR. I'm just laying there waiting for my eyes to get heavy when I see it. Something blacker than black in a corner. Almost looks like smoke creeping up the wall. My eyes are locked on it when I notice something moving beside me. I turn and look, and the wall I'm next to has 3 more figures moving up like smoke up the wall. I start shaking my person like, dude, what the hell is that? And they sit up and point to another corner, and they're like, yeah, they come all the time. There's one over there too. Plops back down and rolls over. Dude, what? This is normal for you? As I turn to look back at the wall, I see one of the smokes melt down and lay next to me. I immediately get up and turn all the lights on. We're sleeping with the lights on tonight. Another night I wake up in this pitch black room. I can't move. I can open my eyes and move them, but I can't move my body. And there's also this weird light shrouding my entire body like a mist, and I can't breathe. I can't move. I start to panic. I can't even move a finger to touch my partner or try to wake them. It felt like an eternity, and I can feel myself like using all my energy to try to fight this, but all of a sudden, like a flip switched. My body sits straight up so fast, I let out this scream. It was like a scream that was like backwards. I was inhaling and screaming at the same time. Another night I wake up and I'm already just staring up at the ceiling. I have this strange feeling of just calm, like blissful. I start seeing figures walking above me. They're made of light, and it reminds me of the scene in Spirited Away on the train with the spirits. Couldn't make out any details, only silhouettes, but I could see some guy wearing a wide-brim hat carrying a briefcase. Some woman-shaped figure in dresses, and I couldn't take my eyes off of them. It was like I was in a trance, and as soon as they appeared, they were gone, and I slipped back into sleep. And the weirdest night for me was the night we went out drinking with some friends. I'm in my early 20s at this time, and drinking was like the go-to thing to do. We get super drunk and make it home at some point. I don't remember much. The grandma and I never really talked much, and her room was on the opposite side of the house of where my room is. She pretty much just stayed to herself and rarely came out unless it was to shower or to eat. So I wake up around 4, and I don't know where I am, and I know I'm on the floor, and I feel carpet. But nothing looks familiar, and it's pretty dark. The only light's coming in from a window, and I see that I'm at the foot of the bed, and I slowly stand up, and I see it's the grandma. She's sleeping in her bed. I slowly make my way to the door and quietly step out and make my way to my side of the house. When I crawl in bed, my person wakes up and is confused, saying 1 minute I was there and the next I wasn't. And that they would have felt me get out of the bed as the bed pushed against the wall. I was sleeping next to the wall and I have to climb over them to get out, so I don't know how I ended up there. Weird experience under pain. I'm not big into paranormal stuff. I think almost all of it's bullshit. My family, though, was always interested in it, and we had a number of experiences which absolutely stunned me. So years ago as a kid, maybe 14 years old, I got a really bad sunburn on my back. I had a lot of those, burn quite easily. The sunburn itself sucks, but the true horror comes with the skin and bubbling and peeling with the mix of intense sunburn pain and horrible itching. So exactly this happened, and at the same time it was summer, no air conditioning. So I was also sweating, and it was just pure agony for me. I was feeling like going mad with horrible itching and intense pain when touching or scratching in the sweaty skin. And at one point, I felt like I would either faint, go mad, or take whatever medicine I can find. I started to close my eyes and kind of meditate. I knew meditation existed, but I knew nothing about it. So I breathed, and the itching felt like knife stabbing. I continue, and I see with my eyes closed the mix of blackness and redness and sparkles and whatever your eyes do. Then something happened which I cannot forget, and I swear to God it's real. I had my eyes closed for minutes now, standing in my room, facing the window but looking down. Suddenly, all that red and black and whatever is disappearing, and everything is blue and white. Then it sounds absolutely stupid, but I can see with my eyes closed. But it looked like some astral vision, and I hate using that term because it sounds like New Age crap. But I swear to the gods, I could see my hands, and I moved them and looked around and saw my room. Everything was blue and turquoise and white, almost like a projection. Light rays, and then out of nowhere, 2 or 3 white little shiny orbs circled me, and all the twitching and itching and pain is gone. After some time, I kind of came out of it and feel absolutely fine. I still see it. I swear I could see my hands and my room with my eyes closed. So weird. Those are some fancy white orbs you got there. I had 3 random encounters with the same stranger over several years. About 8 years ago, in the early evening, I'm shopping for a jacket in a major retailer. That's when this man who looked to be 30-35, clean cut, possibly of some Arabic descent, walked up to me and said, "Shopping for clothes today?" I said, "Yeah, I need a jacket." He then said, "My wife and I just moved to the area and our walls are bare, so I'm looking for items to furnish our space." We then made small talk for maybe a minute or so, and I can't remember what else we talked about. Then he walked away, and at the time I thought it was a bit odd because strangers rarely approach me to make small talk, seemingly for no reason. But I basically forgot about it. About a year and a half later, I'm shopping in a very busy grocery store downtown, about 10 miles from the retail store where I first encountered this person. As I'm in the middle of an aisle looking for my items, I all of a sudden feel somebody standing next to me. Not uncomfortably close, but I hear him say, "Shopping for groceries today?" And at this point, I vaguely knew this was the same gentleman who had approached me over a year earlier. I vaguely knew how unlikely this scenario was, but for some reason I was kind of on autopilot and said, "Yeah, I moved to an apartment in the area and I need to stock up on my kitchen." To which he says, "Me and my wife just moved to the area and our walls are bare, so we have to stock up our kitchen also." We again made small talk for another minute or two. Again, I can't remember what we were talking about. But then he walked away. It wasn't until several minutes later that I realized how unlikely this was in a city of over 3.8 million people. Flash forward about 2 years, and I'm now working and living in a suburb, same city, about 10 miles away from the downtown area I was briefly living in. One late afternoon, I take a break from work to go to a popular home decor store. It's nearby, and as I'm looking at throw pillows, and you guessed it, this same gentleman comes up to me and says, "Shopping for home decorating items today?" And I once again go on autopilot mode and say, "Yeah, I'm looking for a few items to decorate." And you guessed it. He goes, "My wife and I just moved to the area and our walls are bare, so I'm looking for some items to decorate our house." We again make some small talk for about a minute. And again, I can't recall what was said, and he walks away, and this time, however, about 10 to 15 seconds after he leaves, I snap out of my trance or autopilot mode. Whatever you want to call it. I understand the sheer impossibility of this interaction, and I run to catch up with the man. Even though he's only had a few second head start and I was sprinting, he was nowhere to be found. Ran out to the parking lot to catch him driving or walking out, but he wasn't there either. They didn't feel like ominous encounters, but to this day I have no idea what occurred exactly and why. My experiences with beings looking for explanations or similar experiences, please. As far back as I can remember, I've dealt with these beings, and the furthest memory I have associated with them is as follows. I used to live with my great-grandparents growing up, due to neither parental figure really being good at their duties. My grandma Barbara and my grandpa Foxy. My grandma was between 90 and 100% Native American and was very spiritual. My grandpa Foxy, on the other hand, was German. Never really spoke his thoughts on these things. I recall on many occasions, more often than not at the nighttime, seeing these black human-shaped figures roam our house whilst everyone else was rather sleeping or not home. At the time, I thought nothing of it, and I still am unsure how I feel about it. Just curious, looking for an explanation or maybe a shared instance. There were times, however, where these figures would wake up to me and even try to seemingly interact with me, causing my body to freeze freezing cold. Though I still could move, just really wouldn't out of fear of upsetting them. I've seen these figures in my grandmother Sherry's house, and she was quite spiritual as well. This continued with me until they inevitably passed. Ended up moving with my mom at the age of 13. She had inherited their property and such and moved into one of their houses. A trailer on 10 acres of land we own. It's in the middle of the country. I didn't know the news that I'm about to share until I was 16, but it explains a lot of things I've seen or been through. I've noticed this being the third house I'd seen figures in, that something wasn't normal about this. Considering I'd never see them in friends' houses or anything else. And there was something different about the house we were living in now. I'd see the figures a lot more often than before, and I would hear noises and notice things, and even notice my dog having strange behavior, like whining and crying, randomly getting really defensive. Sometimes he'd bark at nothing and stare at nothing. I ended up asking my mom about all these things. She informed me that the man that owned the trailer and the property prior to my great-grandparents murdered his wife and tried to burn her remains in the trash can. Jeez. Even showing me where the burn mark was. The thing that sort of estranged me the most is that she told me the woman's name being Elizabeth Dunn, and it lined up almost perfectly with my mom's name, middle name being Beth, last name Dunn. Something about that sat so eerily with me. Recently moved back into my mom's house to save up some money before I started to attend college, and I noticed the same things I used as before about the cabinets being interacted with and hearing noises and seeing the figure, or even waking up with some random bruises on me that weren't there prior. Forgot to mention, my mom was also raised by my great-grandmother. So, just like me, she is very spiritual. She believes in a lot of things I do. So does anybody have a similar experience or anything that might help explain what I'm going through?